guess who we are is what's here today. Okay. First topic is several martial arts groups have a Black Belt Hall of Fame, and some seems spurious, while others legitimate. What should we make of such honors, and ought they be developed by each association? Should there be an AJA Black Belt Hall of Fame? I'd like to get everyone's opinion, and then I'll let you know what the AJA used to do eons ago. And so is any, I know John put some thoughts in. Can you kind of summarize what you said before, John or Thomas? Denise?
Yeah, as with almost any other title or rank or anything in the martial arts, because there's so much variety and there's so many incredible claims made by people who may not have a lot of substance behind them, you have to always ask what are the qualifications for being invited to join a Hall of Fame? Who's doing the assessment? The context becomes critical, even for something as basic as black belt. And this bleeds into ranking issues. This segues into that, where black belt can mean anything from I did Taekwondo for a year and a half and I'm a black belt, to, in my case, doing Budoshin Jujitsu for 10 to 12 years and getting a black belt finally, or BJJ, where it can mean even more years. Same thing applies to these organizations, where it can mean anything from I paid $500 to get in this Hall of Fame, or it can mean a lifetime of achievement. But you don't know until you ask the question of what the organization's about, or what the attainment or title is about. To use you, George, you're 10th. I would often wonder, before I got into martial arts deeply, like how do you promote somebody who is where he's the highest rank in the entire organization? How does that person get there, and how is that done? And I realized, oh well, there's the National Standards and Certification Board of the AJA, where you have other high-ranking sensei who assess your and other very high-ranking sensei in the organization and think, okay, well, that it's appropriate that this person be promoted. But there's some kind of coherence and integrity to that process, and it's explainable. Other people just magically are declared 10th Dan or Kyoshi, Renshi, Hanshi, and you wonder how they come up with these titles and these other attainments. So it just seems that understanding how they got there, the context of the achievement has to be understood. But as long as that context is presented and the criteria are clear, then I don't have any problem with halls of fame or any of these honors. But it's a major problem. It's epic proportions in the martial arts, because there's nobody stopping them. Nobody's stopping people from making outrageous claims.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with you all across the spectrum there, whether it be a accomplishment award or rank. I think, as you said, if the criteria are out there and clear, that's one thing. If it's just send us $200 and we'll send you your green belt, that's quite another. I think part of the reason I've always wanted everything to be upfront and clear. I don't know whether it comes from being a teacher, and you had to have objectives, and you have to say what the students would do to achieve those objectives. So to me, when I didn't have a handbook or anything like that until I started doing the program with LA City Schools, and they said, well, what's your objective? How are the kids going to meet the criteria? And that's what the handbook and everything else evolved from. And the criteria have changed and they've been modified, but I think there are a lot of systems or maybe organizations that like to keep things under wrap. And for me, it's just easier to be open and honest about it. It just, that way there's no, how do you say that? The only pressure on me is to stick to the standards I've set up for me and my students. and they're public. So that's, there's nothing hidden. There are no secret techniques or anything of that sort. And I think that's, as Tom said, that's part of the problem. Is some people like to make promotions mysterious, and you can be the all high poobah for $5,000. Anyway.
And this did come up. Maybe I can share a bit of this. It's Dave. This would be new to Dave, and this is confidential. But I'll give you the outlines of one issue that's come up, and that's the question of how you conduct Mudansha promotions. And some sensei have been extremely casual about that, where there's been jumping from, say, yellow belt to brown belt at lightning speed, and there have just been some other questionable things, at least at the Mudansha level, which inspired me to go back to the Budoshin, material, to the student handbook, and I came across George's criteria for advancement. And there are 3 ways of advancement. One is at a tournament. Another is if your sensei feels that you're ready to advance as a subjective decision. And then finally, there's the most common one of testing. And I think the testing is seen as the most rigorous by an outsider. You would imagine a non-martial artist to say, well, yes, there should be a test to evidence the skills of this promotion. But that's not always the case. And George's criteria reflect that. And I've seen situations where very experienced martial arts start off in Budoshin, and they're clearly worthy of advancement. It would be stupid to have them at yellow belt for ages when they really are functioning at a higher level. So you can see where that flexibility makes sense and would hold back somebody. But that is an issue that's come up with Dan level promotions. It can be George's criteria are extremely clearly laid. It's extremely rigorously laid out, where what's needed to show that you have the skills of the Shodan are at least a page long and maybe more in the black belt handbook. And as you move up the ranks, the different levels are clearly laid out. So that's a different set of criteria that are very clearly enunciated, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But not every art is like that. We don't have that fortunate expounding and precision of these different levels. Then you get to the higher Dan ranks in Budoshin, and it's as George and I were discussing, it's honorary in the sense of, say you're serving the AJA or Budoshin or doing volunteer work or all this stuff, that factors into those promotions, maybe at least as significantly as technical skill. So at each level, there's different sets of concerns. I'll get off my soapbox now, but this has just been on my mind over the last several days.
Anybody else want
to? I'll just say in general, and this is kind of tangentially related to this topic, is that the general public looks at black belt with if they don't have much of the knowledge at all of martial arts, they look at a black belt like that individual is an expert in self-defense. Yeah. Come to find out that once you are involved in the real milieu of a martial art, you can learn that black belt is intermediate, and that the real quote expert level begins around 6th degree in most venues. So I just think that's kind of interesting, because I remember before I did any training in my martial arts, I was just confined to the odd street fight or in high school behind the stadium. That if I heard the term black belt, or I learned somebody was a black belt, I thought, whoa, they know a lot. And then come to find out that truly they are at the intermediate level, and there's so much further climb. There's so much more to know after you have achieved that intermediate level. I'd like to share that with classes from time to time, and with the general public when I conduct the Art and Chaos, just to let people know that that's the reality.
Yeah, and it's funny, in my experience, so this all goes back to Jigoro Kano and his establishment of belt rankings in the late 19th century, and how in Japan, black belt, strangely enough, doesn't have quite the cachet as it might generally in the United States. There isn't the assumption that a black belt is an expert by any stretch. My experience in the Ido reflects that, where it's a Japanese run organization, and it took me 3 years of training once a week to become Shodan there. And again, the context is critical. To be a Shodan in Japanese swordsmanship involves 12 forms, but knowing those 12 forms extremely well. And I think it's up to Nidan or Sandan that you have only 12 forms, or very few of them, and they expect you to master the basics very well before you move on. But just to be Shodan does not have the cachet nearly as significant as Budoshin black belt, which is a teaching rank, which is the testing is very rigorous, and in my observation, in my own experience, and it's a contextual difference. Black belt, it means something entirely different in those two contexts.
If I can toss a word in here, black belt, so we need to get back to Hall of Fame thing. I think, like, any martial art, if it's done seriously, I think yes, you're learning technical skills, which are important, but you're also developing a sense of patience. And I think if you look at the arts philosophically, that the main thing any art teaches you, if you are serious, is to have patience and persistence and strive to be better. I mean, and none of these are techniques per se. They're more of an attitude towards life. And and each martial art has its physical manifestations of that, whether it be knowledge of certain techniques or a certain amount of proficiency. But even learning how to walk takes patience. I think the dog has gotten bored.
If I could ask somebody to repeat the question, I was kind of hearing what everybody was saying, but I didn't hear the question.
The original question?
Yeah, the original.
We went back to the first question on several martial arts groups have black belt Hall of Fame, and some seem spurious while some are legitimate. And that kind of evolved into promotions to black belts, and there are some concerns that there are some promotions being made to black belt that are not necessarily following guidelines, particularly within the Budoshin system. Yeah. And that creates a problem, and I'm going to put that tactfully.
I just like to throw in. I think the idea of belt rankings is an act of great benefit to the martial arts, to have, as George was just saying, to have some incremental measurement of progress is an act of genius. And I don't think Kano is responsible for the colored progression, but especially for children to have, it's like the Boy Scouts or other hierarchical organizations where you gain skills at different levels. I think that's incredibly helpful. It's just not subjecting that structure to abuse and manipulation that would be the goal. But I do think having ranks, it's not an obsession, but it is a big focus of a lot of serious martial artists. Like to have a title like Kyoshi, Renshi, Hanshi, those are real distinctions in Budoshin, I know, and that's it's very meaningful. In a culture where, like in the United States, there are no titles of nobility or outlawed and all that, but to have that, to have rigorously underpinned honorifics, titles, I think that's significant. To say I've spent my life doing this martial art and this term recognizes that, like Hanshi, is significant.
Right. Just to mention the AJA, when I was on the board, the AJA looked at whether or not to adopt honorary titles 2 or 3 times. And every time we looked at it, we decided we wouldn't want to touch it with an 11-foot pole because different rue, even within the AJA, had different criteria as to when you could be any of these honorary titles. And so you couldn't, so if for example, if Budoshin gave the title of Shihan to someone from another group would say, well, that's not right because either we reserve it for a higher rank or we give that to our Shodans, and it should have been given to that person a long time ago. And so that's why the AJA simply decided not to deal with honorary rank titles.
I remember that dispute, that discussion, and I noticed on the Budoshin site, I guess within the Budoshin context, there are still titles recognized.
Yeah,
but you can't generalize between vastly different Ryu of those things.
So that's okay. Let's get back to Hall of Fame. A long time ago, I'm not necessarily objecting to a Hall of Fame. Decades ago, the AJA used to have an annual awards program. And this is probably more valued to Thomas as he's a board member. And I guess maybe you can, if the board is looking at this, something they want to reconsider. They used to have an annual awards program where each instructor, this works its way up from low belts all the way up through the black belts. Each instructor could nominate they could give, I said, let me rephrase it. Each instructor could issue, quote unquote, an annual award for, exceptional student or something like that to as many students as he wanted to, but he had to pay for the plaques. The plaques were purchased and issued by the AJA. And the plaques at that time maybe cost $7-8 a piece. Okay, this is going back into the 80s, maybe the 90s. Okay, and he could do the same with his black belts. He could also nominate one of his Mudansha and one of his Yudansha to be the regional award winner for outstanding student or outstanding black belt. And then all the sensei in that particular region would he'd have to give reasons for this award. And then the instructors in that region, or maybe the regional directors would vote on which student in each region or which black belt in each region would get the outstanding student award or black belt award for that region. Okay. You would, and then they take the winners of each region and say, okay, which one is the outstanding student nationally? And which one is the outstanding black belt nationally? And they would issue a plaque for that. And the regional and national awards were paid for by the AJA. The regional directors would also have the ability to nominate one instructor as the outstanding instructor for their region. And then the board of directors would have to vote on which instructor was the outstanding instructor for the region and nationally. Okay. And yeah, it was maybe a plaque that costs, $8 to $10. But that's how the AJA awards program generally ran. And the only problem that there really was in the program was getting someone to run it, because it does take it was a time-consuming process, because I'm sure, as all of you know, we don't always stay up to date with everything and get things in when they're supposed to be and all that other stuff, because life gets in the way. But that's generally how the AJA did it, and I think it worked very well, because to get an award, you didn't have to pay for it. to get an award, you knew it was coming from someone who believed in you and felt you were, had went above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak. And it had intrinsic value, for lack of a better phrase. Whereas some of these ones that are purchased for, Hall of Fames, etc., the instructors know that they are buying that award. And if they don't understand that, to some extent, that's a sad thing, because if someone's willing to award you something, it means they're willing to award you something, and it shouldn't be costing you anything. Now, if you want to attend the dinner, fine. If you want to attend the convention, fine. But that award should be there whether or not you're attending dinner or the convention. And it should be at the organization's expense, not at your expense. And that to me gives it an entirely different value. So, that's where my 2 cents are. And that's happening. I've had awards presented to me, and I've never gone to dinners or, conventions, etc. And they mean a lot to me, because it indicates that the community thinks I've done something special. So anyway, that's my take on it.
The people who are initially submitting those names are the people who are working with those people directly on the mat in the dojo.
Yes.
And perhaps between classes to promote the learning. And so that you start right there. That's where the rubber meets the road. And that alone, you mentioned intrinsic value. That's a great place to start.
And it might encourage more instructors to offer seminars, to visit other dojos, other Budoshin dojo, things of that sort. And it's just, it's how do you say, it's for an instructor, it's part of it's the instructor's responsibility, which is how much do you want to, or how much are you able to put yourself out there? Because I know some instructors, have a limited amount of time for jujitsu. That's a reality of the world. I've faced that all my life. Not all my life, but ever since I got to jujitsu. And you have to balance jujitsu out with other things that are going on in your life. But I think it would encourage a lot of positive growth and participation if instructors knew that, and I'm just talking about just the AJA, if instructors knew that if they put out a lot of effort, they're going to get recognized, and it's not going to cost them a damn cent. For lack of a better phrase.
I'm completely on board with you in this thinking, George. I would go back to context, and if it's an award that is not handed out like candy, that has real distinction, I think that would motivate a lot of people. The other side of this is the tendency in our culture to hand out participation medals and to say that nobody is more worthy of anybody else, this hyper egalitarianism. And that's where you sometimes run into danger. In my own place where I work, which employs 3,000 or 4,000 people, there's an institutionalized awards giving called Bond Awards, and I forget what BOND stands for, but they're very easy to give, and there are different levels of them, but they really lack distinction. And to see, you get an announcement every Monday of who's won a Bond Award, and you think, well, that's nice, but who hasn't gotten a Bond Award? It's just so common that it confers no distinction. Yeah. Whereas something that's truly significant, a few years ago or 2 years ago, I was awarded the what is it called? It's not an award of distinction, but some recognition of distinction. Distinction was in the title from the AJA because of all this work I'd put in, and I had no idea I was getting it. And Dave Basil, the head of the AJA, is very restrained in giving out awards. He's given out a couple more of these to other people on the board, but it took a lot of effort from me over years. And these other people had labored for like 10 years doing things. So that meant a lot to me. It means, but it's because of the effort I put into it, and the fact that it was rare to get some award like this made all the difference. The
Right.
other side of just constantly getting awards is a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I am so opposed to, I would say, participation awards, and there was a term that was used in education for several years, had to do with self-esteem,
Yeah.
and I don't like the word self-esteem. You know, there is a term for what do you call it, for the participation awards where everybody is
Equally mediocre or something, or
something like that. And I would simply tell my kid, I said, you know, I'm not going to play with this game with you. You know, it's I'm concerned about your integrity. And if you know, if you do a good job in here, you get a good grade. And if you do a lousy job, you get a lousy grade. You can fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not going to give you a good grade just, you know, just to
Yeah,
give
the
it's
snide way of putting it is awards are like hemorrhoids. In the end, every asshole gets one. That's whenever you're handing out an award, you want to be concerned about that interpretation. Like, oh, well, or who else got this award? Oh, this guy I can't stand, or this person who did nothing. Well, what does that really mean?
or where was your hand?
We've become somewhat, I think, as a society, obsessed with not offending and making sure that everyone has their self-esteem intact. And I mean, it's gone so far. I'm an educator, and it's gone so far for us that we're literally not allowed to give them the actual grade they get in our class. If they have, let's say they have done absolutely nothing. In previous years, I'd give them whatever they got, 8%, 2%, whatever it was, right? Can't do that anymore. We must give them a 50% F. They call it a minimum F. And there are people out there that are doing what I laughingly call research in education, who are saying, you know, yes, this is a viable psychological concept. You know, granted, I'll give my kids in the first quarter a minimum F, so to speak, because if I don't, they check out. They do the math as well as anybody, and if they realize they can't possibly do anything in the first quarter, they tend to check out. But after the first quarter, they're on their own. You know, they must produce. And I think that, and now our school district has gone with the minimum F across the board. So we even get little alerts as a teacher saying, Robert Jones, you have scores that are below the minimum F and in violation of CCSD policy. And of course, I give that its due concern and delete it immediately. But nevertheless, they're out there, and so that's where we're at. And I don't know whether other school districts have done the same thing, but it seems that's sort of the cap on the obsession that we have with preserving self-esteem. And you know, my dad would be mortified at such a policy, because when I was a kid going through school, there were consequences that we had for not producing in school. He looked at that as that's our job. If we're not producing, then there will be penalties that we must pay. And so he would literally ground us. If we did anything in school where the teachers had to contact him, oh, woe unto us, because that would not be well received in the home setting. And today the parents will go, oh, my little darling Johnny, clearly an angel. What did you do to him? to cause him to behave in this way.
The thumb,
And my
the thumb screws I use in the classroom.
yeah, exactly. And I tell my dad would be, "What did you do?" Like that was, I did this, Dad. Okay, well,
Okay, so we got John Kruger has just joined us. Who else just?
He's on Zambia time.
He's on Zambia.
Zambia time. Holy moly!
Where's?
I hope he hasn't been attacked by a crocodile this week.
This week
They had it for lunch yesterday.
And made some shoes out of it in the afternoon.
He doesn't live in Florida, does he? That's the place.
What's that video?
That's the place I always say. Weird.
Jonathan, do you have your crocodile with you?
Yes, I do. As usual.
Your pet crocodile?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Matter of fact, my brother has been having to shoot them because they're trying to eat his ducks.
That's being foul.
Do you ever make use? Do you
I
make
was
use of
telling
their
you,
carcasses? Do you make anything out of them, or you just what happens to their
Oh
skin?
no, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed
okay,
to. You can get into trouble for that. You
Hmm.
can get into trouble. But if they come onto your property, you're allowed to deal with them if they become dangerous. But when you have to bury the carcass, you're not allowed to do anything with the carcass otherwise.
I guess that makes sense in
Yeah.
the larger scheme of things.
But the problem I have is when I'm trying to get to you see where my home is and the dojo, I have to cross a dam wall. And in the floods, the crocodile knows, oh, the sensei has to go to the dojo, so he waits for me on the dam wall, and I try to cross. I have to throw rocks at him, and he doesn't have to move. I have to phone the kids to come and throw rocks from the other side to chase him, so I can get to the dojo. And we're talking big boys. We're talking about 18 feet crocodiles. You know, it's bad.
Okay, let's get back to problems. Other problems.
Sorry about that. Yes.
First world and third world problems.
This has been an interesting Zoom meeting so far. Okay, let's get serious for a moment. Okay, second topic. Do any of you work with physically disabled students, such as confined to wheelchair, crutches, etc.? Does anyone?
So I've worked with students who have processing issues.
Yeah.
And that's not that uncommon. If I say, right hand goes so and so, they'll move their left. It's not even like clockwise and counterclockwise. Just use your right hand to do such and such, and they'll use their left. Use your left hand, they'll use their right. It gets to the point where I almost want to say the opposite hand so that they'll use the correct hand. But other than that, I haven't had anybody come to me with serious physical limitations.
I have not either. I mean, I've had a couple of deaf mute students, but I've covered that in previous Zoom meetings. I've had students come back on the mat with arms in arms in casts and legs in casts. And you just, to me, that's one of the nice things about jujitsu is you can work around these injuries for the most part.
And some of them overlap with, say, if you have a student in a wheelchair or somebody who can't use a limb, those temporary injuries that we may have if we have to be in a wheelchair for months, that would invite the exploration of how to defend yourself in a wheelchair, even if it's only temporarily.
Right.
But somebody may be permanently in a wheelchair or permanently be without the use of his right arm. So all those flow pretty easily from temporary injuries to things that might be permanent for some people. Another art I pursue is the use of the cane as a self-defense weapon. The cane has associations of fragility kind of built in. A lot of older people will use canes, and the goal is to show that they're not just crutches that they can be used for self-defense, and whole martial arts have evolved around them. So there's a huge flexibility in this area.
Yeah, I think it's the issue is, and perhaps for us, is that we need to get our students, the ones that have all their extremities working, to recognize, sometimes even doing simple techniques with just one hand, like I'm left-handed, so I have an advantage. Okay, so what happens if a person swings at me with a fist on the right hand with their right fist, and I can't use my left hand or arm? And to get them to practice techniques with just one extremity, one arm, one hand, and it's not their favorite arm. For most people, that would be they'd have to do things with just their left hand versus just using either hand for both. And from my experience, is once they get the hang of it, once their brain decides this works, then it's more of a mental issue than a physical issue. But it's something they have to do physically to get, how do you say, over that hump.
You've also done classes that I've attended where you'll work with blindfolds.
Yes.
And that's just as a way of enhancing one's feel for techniques. But I mean, that's also relevant potentially to somebody who's blind. I mean, to a student who's permanently blind or has serious vision problems. They're all translatable.
Yeah. And just as a word of real caution for any of you who want to have your students practice blindfolded, and I usually limit it to brown and black belts. For some reason, when you're blindfolded, because you lose your visual perception, you tend to do techniques a lot faster. I don't understand why yet, but it's happened too often to, so I consider it fairly common. So you really have to forewarn the student that is blindfolded to do the technique, to slow down and do the technique slowly. And that has to be a conscious effort on their part, because if they're well trained, which is you do techniques by feel rather than seeing if it's working, if they feel a technique is working, they're just going to go faster. It's a natural inclination. The brain works a lot faster than we'd like it to sometimes. So it's something where you're going to have to tell them, do your technique execution very slowly, because some of them are amazed at how fast they can do techniques when they're blindfolded. So, it's just a word of warning to the sensei.
Yeah.
Who said something? Hello? Yeah, Tom.
I have an interlope.
Okay.
That wasn't me. I thought it was Jonathan who said
I
something.
thought it was Jonathan too.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just calling my son to come and listen.
Okay.
Interesting topic here. I want my son to also hear.
Yeah. But it's
Next generation.
There are a lot of things you can do in terms of blindfolded exercises, and you really can't describe them over the internet or anything. It just has to. One thing I'll do is working on the concept of ki and sensing another attacker is to have a black belt or brown belt blindfolded, just standing in the center of the mat, and he'll have maybe 3 or 4 other belts around him, and they'll reach for him slowly, one at a time. And the goal is for him, if he thinks he senses them, is to sort of deflect their hand away. And some belts actually get pretty good at it. They're blindfolded. I said, and you know, it's something I don't understand completely either. I don't understand everything I do, but it's an interesting practice for them, because the more they do that, they get the better at sensing body movement to them without being able to see it. And I don't know whether you call that sensing another person's energy flow or ki or whatever.
And you see the practical implications here. I mean,
Yeah.
if Budoshin is geared to street attacks, there are plenty of street attacks that happen in darkness or in semi-light, where that sense of feel and perception that goes beyond just the visual can be very helpful. And I'm surprised that we don't train that way more often. In another one of your classes years ago in Virginia, I remember being attacked by multiple attackers, at least 3 or 4 of them, and your goal was to show how to use one of the attackers to gain control of him, and then use him as a barrier or a shield against other attackers. And I thought, well, that could easily happen. That's a possible scenario on the street.
Yeah.
There should be more encouragement to have sensei create realistic situations and novel situations to keep training fresh that way, and to keep situations new.
Yeah, and this is, you know, you can't do multiple attackers with a green belt or, you know, white belt. But I think as the student moves up in rank and even into black belt, you have to put them in challenging situations. And I would even go so far with my black belts and brown belts, as they would have like maybe 3 attackers, and I would just call them off to attack fast enough so ultimately the black belt, the Tory, gets overwhelmed by them. And inevitably it's going to happen with 3 attackers. But sometimes some brown and black belts can really ward off 2 or 3 attackers for you know, maybe several attacks before they get nailed to the ground. And that's a good experience for them, because I look at it as well, you know, if you've got 2 or 3 attackers, you can't be kind to any of these 3.
And it could easily happen on the street. So
Yes.
where do your years of training in jiu-jitsu leave you if they don't prepare you at least as an advanced rank, deal with being exhausted or being injured or being in the dark or having multiple attackers and all these extraneous things that can happen on the street, instead of like a very controlled training thing.
And one thing you can do with all students is I will, on rare occasion, I'll have them come to class in street clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell them, bring a couple extra shirts.
Yep.
And okay, tonight we're going to train with street clothing, and it changes their, you know, for some of them it's really difficult until they realize, well, I don't care if they got a shirt on, you know, if I throw them and the shirt rips, tough. And it's a hard, you know, because we like.
Did you ever have to replace somebody's shirt?
Well, no, you know, that's why you bring 2 or 3 shirts. They say, can we wear a sweatshirt? And I'll say no. I said, bring some t-shirts. Sweatshirt's almost as good as a judo gi on the street. So, you know, and this is not something that's, you know, some kids will look on it as a fun or a break. And if you're a teacher, you know, on occasion, you have to do fun stuff with your students. You have to do stuff that's off the norm, because that's what keeps them interested. And it's just, to me, that's part of being a good sensei is to come up with stuff that's off the norm, that's safe for them to do, but yet will improve their skill level. And it has nothing to do with their belt rank. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we got off topic on that one. And okay, third topic. Your role as a sensei, parent, counselor, guide, advisor, teacher, friend. what kind of example are you to your students? What values do you want your students to follow? Better yet, emulate? What do you as a sensei see as the key to being a good sensei, so that, as Sensei Chris Kadamian, who unfortunately is not with us today, alluded to, they will seek to follow in your footsteps? And then
I would,
another
I would,
question there was,
Good
is which I
topic.
think,
Good topic.
which I think is a separate question. Is being a sensei a lifestyle or just something you do for a period of time or years?
Oh,
I would-
lifestyle.
I would love to hear
I go with
Jonathan.
lifestyle. That's
Lifestyle, absolutely. It's a whole lifestyle. They're looking at you all the time, especially where I live. It's a small world. And they even want to know, what does the sensei do in town every day when he goes shopping? Because they want to know, is he the same sensei that teaches us in the dojo, or is it he's just play rolling? Or is that the real way he lives his everyday life? And they actually I've had students follow me secretly into the mall to see if I'm the same guy that they see in the dojo. The way I act, the way I speak to people.
now it's starting to get towards stalking behavior there, but I think it's
Because I said to him, you have to be the same person in the dojo and in everyday life. So they said, all right, let's see if Sensei is he's the real deal. And they actually did it. They followed me, and I saw them one day on a weekend.
Yeah.
And they came back and they said, yeah, we see Sensei is the same guy. He's not just a sensei, but he's the same person even in his everyday life.
And just to give the other gentleman on the call some context, Jonathan, you've been in Zambia like generationally. Your family settled there.
Oh yeah, I'm
centuries
fifth
ago, and
generation Zambian.
yeah, so you
Wow.
were a missionary background, and you're like a beacon of influence for these people who have often very little, and it's an unusual situation for a sensei in the United States to be in, but it's so powerful.
I find these kids off the streets. I find them off the streets. I look for the ones that have got real potential and want to get on in life and do something with their lives. If I can train them up, get them to a certain level, I can get them into the police service, into the Air Force. I've got one that's just about to graduate as a doctor. These are kids you just find off the streets. I look for the ones that want to get off the streets. They want to do something with their lives. And I've had some success, and I've had some, of course, that have gone back into their old ways, but most of it is successful. These kids want to get on with life, and they see training in Jujitsu can get them somewhere. If they can get into the military, wow, that's even better. Then they can get sponsorship to go to university. Yes.
Gigantic. I mean, and that influence exists in the United States and in other more developed areas, but it's so powerful there. And you think, well, lessons you've picked up there are translatable. Like, what better evidence of martial arts having permanent influence in one's life? Like, your training helps some guy get into the military or get into a university.
Oh yeah, it's a way of life for these kids. They know, if I can start in the martial arts, this is going to change my whole life. It's going to change my whole future. It's even going to get me somewhere in life. So it's not just a dojo thing. They've realized this is a way I can get out of poverty and get somewhere and do something with my life. And I feel, as a sensei, we should all look at this, that we've got the potential to make future presidents even in our country, right there in our own dojo. Ministers and presidents, doctors. Mr. Kirby, look how many people you've touched in your life.
I mean, I think that's an apt comparison to say it's like a minister being a minister in so many ways.
That's right.
Yes. It's a voluntary association. They look to you as a father figure at times and guidance at times. And they certainly look to you as a living example of your teachings. And if you're not then you're disappointing in a lot of so many ways. But it does. That's why it's a lifestyle, because in many respects, your students and the parents of your students feel like they can call you anytime. And many times they do. They want a piece of you constantly, just like a pastor,
That's
is
right.
the congregation. And it's a very challenging lifestyle for that reason. I think a lot of pastors would agree that it has a tendency to take its toll on families and even on pastors over time.
That's right, Mr. Jones. We are the dojo pastors.
I think, and this came up initially when we were way back on topic one dealing with black belts, and I think Jonathan's brought it up again, is what we're instilling in our students is a sense of legitimate self-confidence that they can achieve their dreams or things that they did not previously thought were possible. And,
Yes.
And
that leads to a legitimate sense of self-esteem,
right,
as opposed to this
and
made up self-esteem.
Yes, it's legitimate because we recognize they have accomplished something through their own effort. Okay, yeah, you helped get them there, but they had to put out the effort to get there. It just doesn't end up on their plate.
If I may jump in for just a moment, Sensei, you mentioned earlier about your disdain for self-esteem. There's another term that I want to throw out there. Self-esteem is largely generated by how others see you, or the outward appearance, like a false Hall of Fame nomination, versus something more significant than self-esteem by far, self-perception, how we see ourselves, how our students see themselves. We can influence that. And that's much more powerful because that's inward direct.
Right. Yes, I agree with you, 100. Yeah, I think that's it. It's how you see yourself, and I know from the young people I've heard, that's for some of them that's the greatest challenge I face, is to get them to see themselves differently. Because I've had students that no other teachers can deal with. There have been students that I couldn't deal with. I'm talking about public school. And sometimes you find a way to open the door to them deciding to work with you in the weirdest ways. And it's usually nothing major. It may be, I mean, I had a reputation for protecting my kids, even against administrators at times. And I didn't always win, but my kids knew they could, if they had no other recourse, they could come to me. One of the things I always did as a teacher was my phone number was always listed in the phone book. And I tell my kids up front at the start of the year, I said, if you really need someone to just listen to you, give me a call. I'll listen. I won't make any judgments. Because I know most of the time, if you let people talk, 9 times out of 10, they can solve their own problems positively. And I would get maybe 1 or 2 calls a year. I never, in 55 years, I maybe got 1 or 2 prank calls out of it. And then they'd say, hey, it's Mr. K, it's me, and I'm only joking. I said, okay, fine. I think they were curious as to whether or not I answered the phone or not. But as John said, you have to be there for your students, whether they be adults or kids. You have to be willing to work with them. You have to be
even outside of the dojo.
You have to. You have all these have tos that are your responsibility as a sensei. And
that's right.
You're a parent. For your parent, particularly the kids, you're a parent. You're a guide. You're an advisor. You don't have to be their. You don't have to be their friend.
I like that.
They'll respect you if you do a good job at the other 3.
It's also, sorry, go ahead, George.
Yeah, they don't. I don't think students expect you to be their friend. They expect you. I think they expect you to be fair and they'd like you to respect them. And but that's, you know,
I would just throw in that this is one instance where martial arts, to me, feel elevated from purely sporting pursuits. One could argue that participation in
That's right.
sports, yeah, sports are one thing that can develop self-perception, self-esteem, if you want to use that problematic phrase. But with martial arts, at least in the case of Budoshin, you've got an explicit set of values that go along with being part of a Budoshin person, involving integrity, humility, and respect, that they're not explicitly covered in sports. Like if you become an excellent football player, that's wonderful, and it may develop self-esteem. But there's the professional example of a lot of football players in the United States are not really a set of moral values you may want to be emulating. There are many exceptions, but it doesn't reduce the ability of a football player to be a great football player if he's morally questionable in his personal life. In martial arts, I think if a martial artist is doing something off the mat that's very problematic, that would have implications to his continuing to be a sensei, or it ought to draw questions about his appropriateness for a role as in that leadership capacity as a sensei.
Right.
And that's what elevates martial arts above just pure sporting pursuits, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, where there, if you are a serious martial arts sensei, there are very high moral expectations of you, and people put you on a higher behavior, I don't want to know if we call it stricter, but they put you on a higher behavioral standard measurement. I don't know if that's a correct term. They expect more out of you as a person. So I think that's, anyone else want to throw something in there, or?
No, I just think that we have to have professional standards, and that's what, like as a classroom teacher, you have professional standards, for example, conduct, behavior, etc. And it seems like I'm having a background check done on me like every 5 minutes when I'm in education. Anytime something changes, they go, aha, have you had your latest background check done? Well, no, but knock yourself out. And and I think that there are those who don't have those professional standards, and very often I think they either get caught or have a burst of conscience and decide to do something with it. And I think I think a lot of times I think martial arts instructors have that same sort of professionalization challenge. There are numerous stories in the news periodically about martial arts instructors who take advantage of a 14-year-old or 13-year-old student or something like that.
Very sad.
And there's that's the way it is with pastors, and that's the way it is with school teachers and anybody that comes in contact with kids. Like our district would just about have a heart attack if I said, here's my home phone number, knock yourself out, give me a call if you want.
Yeah, that will be read a different way than you intended.
Yeah, exactly. And even if it weren't, that would be a violation of district policy. So
you're not allowed to give your phone number to any of your students?
Nope.
They would assume it's being used for the wrong reasons, that they're trying to get too close, or they might abuse.
Completely different. The first thing they do when they come, please, Sensei, can I have your number? Because, I've got issues and I need,
well, now my martial arts world sort of gives me a little edge around that. So I can give them my card and say, here you go, here's my card and the school phone number, which goes to me anyway. And
so the card covers you.
I can, yeah. And if they say, well, I'll say, well, they're part of my martial arts club. They've been invited to come down to the mother school anytime they want. So there you go. I mean, that's it.
the point of clarification, I do not give my phone number out. I said, if you're interested in if you really have the need.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's
You
good.
really
Yeah.
have the need to give me a call. If you're really, you're really upset with something and you need someone to just listen to you, my phone number is in the phone book.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I hadn't caught that distinction. But yeah. Good.
No,
That's good.
no. I don't write it out on the whiteboard and say, hey, give me a call.
Yeah.
Sensei, I have a question. What's a phone book?
Yeah.
There's no phone
Use
books
those
anymore.
anymore.
See, the same thing happened when internet came on, and I let my kids turn their work in online, and they'd obviously need an email address because things were not that technically, and the same thing, I said, if turn your homework in, this is the email address you use, and obviously I'd know who it was because they had to send the email. But I never really had a kid who abused it.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be kids that would tell me where to get off in the classroom, and I just tell them go outside and cool off for a moment.
I mean, we're living in a world where I do interviews for one of my universities for high schoolers who want to get into the university, and you don't do interviews anywhere but in public places. They are explicit about never being alone with a student, never giving them your phone number, never emailing them about anything except making plans to see them. There is this default risk-averse assumption that we don't want to have any accusations of abuse or anything untoward. So it's a different world.
I mean, to me, that's really. I mean, I retired in 2006. To me, that's really sad.
It is. It is.
It makes the whole world. To me, I had a good. Well, I had a good relationship with most of my kids. They could be completely honest with me. I was honest with them. Very rarely did a parent get involved. I knew most students didn't want their parents involved, so that was a good negotiating chip on my head. And I just think, yes, society has changed. That's unfortunate because it really it short circuits or makes it impossible for people to establish a good student-teacher relationship or student-sensei relationship. Because I guess the word is trust.
Yeah.
That level of trust. And the sad part is there have been people in every profession that have abused it.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part is that, the person screws it up very well. When I was a teacher, times I was also a union rep. I had to represent teachers who should have never gotten tenure in the first place. I mean, I had no problems putting my hands on kids. You have to use self-restraint, but
You can forget that now, George.
Yeah.
Touching a student, my daughter's school. Yeah,
We are allowed to touch them, but it has to be when another person is injured or endangered, we are endangered, or property is endangered. Those are the three
that's what I'm saying.
circumstances that allow us.
It's an endangered situation, breaking up a fight. I mean, I didn't just go up to the person and touch him. That's not cool.
Yeah.
But if it was to protect them from injury.
Yeah, that's understandable. And my daughter goes to a Quaker school, which of course is pacifist, no violence under any circumstances. But a female math teacher, went up to a student probably age 10 to 12 or so who was misbehaving, and she just put her hand on the student's shoulder to try to get his attention and talk to him, and without any kind of restraint. she just touched him, and that was enough to get her fired.
Oh,
No,
Yeah, it's that extreme.
Wow.
seriously.
That's
That's
but yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the school and the community.
Hmm.
school district policies themselves. And
District policies and
so you're not allowed to punish any child at school.
oh, we can punish
You
them.
can
We
punish
Have
just-
some kind of work duty or something.
you just have to follow the rules in punishing them.
yeah.
My son cleaned out the school drain in front of the school this on Saturday. He had to clean the whole school front drain with his friends, and that was with a shovel and that. Would that be allowed in America?
No,
Nope.
In America, you would get sued for using slave labor or something. Or something insane.
The only thing Daniel didn't like is because I drove past and waved at him, and he wasn't very pleased standing inside the drain there with a shovel. Of all times, Dad has to drive past and wave and beep and say, "Hey, keep it up."
well, what you did, you embarrassed.
Good word.
Can I say it wasn't that you drove past and waved at him. It embarrassed him in front of his friends. You see, that's
Yeah, because they were like, "Hey, Dad, look, Daniel, your father's waving. He must like what you guys are doing."
no. There are things we cannot do in this country. Although they would be. I'm just going to tell a short story. Then we need to get back to reality. When I was teaching junior high, couple of my kids as extra credits made what's called a stock. It was used in colonial times, where if people did something wrong, they were put, their hands and head were put in a wood thing, and they had to stand in the village center in this stock, so to speak. And
Okay.
and my kids took it as a privilege to be in the stock. Okay. So I'm running class, and I've got one kid in the stock. The principal walks by, and he was a good principal. He says, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, he forgot his pencil or something stupid like that." And he said, "He's spending 5 minutes in the stock." And he said, principal says, "It's not that I object to it, but if a parent walks by this room, there's going to be hell to pay."
Yeah.
Seriously.
So, it's, to you with your son, there's a certain amount of social acceptance of certain types of punishment that, he recognized it. He didn't make it, he was unhappy about doing it, but I don't think he made that big of an issue of it, because it was, other kids were also given the same task. And students have their own, they accept stuff. Kids are a long way from stupid. And I think then we need to get off this. I think that when you have outside forces, for lack of a better phrase, coming in and saying you can't do this, you can't do that, it takes away from that relationship. Like it's telling a parent they can't give their kid a swat on the bottom.
Mm.
Well, that's a whole that may
That's a
be
whole
the
different
subject
ball.
of others, because in some states in America it is perfectly legal to swat your child. On the other hand, there's a difference between that and taking a rod or a belt or some
Yes.
implement and whipping the hell out of them.
Right.
So the law
Yes.
distinguishes that.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah. Okay, let's go on here.
Say I'm going to need to sign off because of prior commitment, but I want to thank everybody for what you taught me today, and I've taken multiple pages of notes.
Okay. Do we want to stop here? And that leaves us with 2 topics left for next time, which is probably good. One is, do political discussions belong in the dojo? And that phrase is open to various interpretations, so we need to clarify that one first of all. And this is from Dave Clark. Let's finally put to rest the obfuscation between the terms technique and kata. Our current kakura contains yet again multiple mentions by confused practitioners. And so, I took the time earlier this morning and wrote down what I thought were clarification, but I'd like to get input from others as well. So maybe we can leave that for the next meeting as well. If you have any additional topics, such as how do we get the alligator off the wall so Sensei can get to the dojo?
Oh yeah, please,
Crocodile.
I would really ask for some advice there when you've got this 18-foot there and he's like, I might have the Sensei for dinner tonight if I'm lucky.
But
I had a Japanese sensei come from Japan, and I warned him. I said, "Don't come home at 8 o'clock after it's dark, because there's crocodiles." He didn't believe me until he stepped on it as he was coming home. He soon came home early the following day.
Could you upload some pictures to Facebook, Jonathan? I want to see these crocodiles.
Oh, yeah, I will. I would. Yeah, I would love to send them. Yeah. Oh, you see these big monsters there?
yeah,
Another lot that loves to come into my dojo are the monkeys. I've got monkeys that come in, and if I leave the door open, they come in and they swing on the flags and all that, and then they do all the roll. Seriously, they come in there, and I think they watch us or something. They roll and climb up the rafters, and they cause a lot of destruction.
You should have a mini series focused on your dojo, Jonathan. I mean, it's like at least a short movie, all the adventure you faced.
Yeah, I think I should.
Yeah,
One kid, we had a Christmas party for the underprivileged, and the monkeys joined in as well. They came and sat with the kids, and the kids gave some of their Christmas food to them because they reckon, well, we part of the dojo, so why shouldn't we get something as well? So, Thomas, do you think it'd be all right if I said to people, do you think we should start giving them some judo uniforms as well?
Yeah, there you go. Or at least paint belts across their bellies. Anyway.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea.
Make sure they have AJA patches on them, though. That's the critical thing. Got it.
Yes.
Set numbers up.
This session.
There was one sensei was offended. We had a Canadian flag. He donated a Canadian flag, and the monkeys love this Canadian flag, and they love to swing on this one. And he got offended. Why don't they swing on the other flags? Why do they go for the Canadian one?
Free healthcare.
That's what I'm going with.
Maybe again, Canadians are considered a rarity.
No, they just love this Canadian flag. They wouldn't leave it alone. Maybe it's the color or the maple leaf there or something. I don't know.
Okay, let's seriously. If you come up with some good topics, we need some topics for next time, which will be on April 16. And I think that's going to be about it for the day. And
that's at 8 o'clock, right?
Not 8 o'clock, not 8:30. Yes.
Okay.
And anyone who showed up at 8:30, I apologize for the typographical error that showed up somewhere in some email, and won't happen again, hopefully. Anyway, have a great weekend. Take care.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Thank
you. Please come again, Jonathan. You've got some great stories.
Yes, lovely. Yes. I love this. This makes my weekend talking to you all.
Excellent.
Good.
All right. Take care.
Well, take care.
Yeah.
All right.